All right, and we're live.
Welcome to A Nice Place to Brew. I'm Jason.
And I'm George.
I'm
This is
Dave.
our hello, Dave. we will introduce our guest very shortly. But before we do, want to make mention. This is our April 21st here on the webcast. We do this show every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central Time. We have a YouTube page with all of our current and past episodes. And we have our social media links. So check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at A Nice Place to Brew and Nice Place to Brew. And on our website at www.aniceplacetobrew.com. All right, we got that out of the way. Dave Campbell, welcome to A Nice Place to Brew. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
All right.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and just kind of dive right in. You are. Can you give us just a little bit of background of where you brew at right now and kind of where the road took you?
Sure. So I'm currently at On Tour Brewing Company. We're out here in the Chicago Brew District region, just west of the West Loop in Chicago. Neighbors with Goose Island, Finches, District Brew Yards, all those guys. And I am actually the new guy here. So I joined the party.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I joined the party March 1st, kind of right before everything hit the fan. But before that, I was at Lagunitas for about 2 years and some change. Prior to that, I was out on the East Coast in New Jersey for just over a year at a brew pub called Harvest Moon. And my beginnings started at Finch's Beer Company right here in Chicago. So that's where I got my start kind of on the packaging line and progressed to assistant brewer, became a shift brewer, and then just sort of advanced into other breweries and brewing roles from there.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And
So,
as someone, as a Pennsylvania native, I have to say, I'm sorry to hear about your time in New Jersey.
Oh, right on.
What are you drinking tonight?
I got it's called Curb My Flight. It's a sessionable IPA up here at the brewery. Shifties. I'm still getting off my work shift here, so it's nice to jump in with you guys for a shifty.
Absolutely.
All right.
What about you, George?
I've got my my Belgian blonde that I made, which may or may not be in a snow globe on its way to you and Scott at the moment.
All right. Well, I'll be very excited when said snow globe arrives at my porch here.
Okay.
Good deal.
What about you?
So I've got a beer that I'm trying for the first time. This was kind of a spontaneous buy. This is made by Riverlands Brewing Company out of St. Charles, and it is a New England IPA, which I imagine we'll talk about in some detail tonight. This is called Gilded King. I'll hold up the can in a second, but it's brewed with El Dorado and Citra hops. So here's what the can looks like.
Nice.
Gilded King. Okay. And so what style is it intended to be?
New England.
Oh, New England. Okay. Yeah.
So
Well,
the Guinness glass doesn't tell the story, of course, but yeah, that's definitely haze there. So
definitely hazy. Yeah.
No mystery there. So let's see. The juice elements are definitely there.
Okay.
The hops are a little mild. I thought it was going to pack a little bit more of a punch, but refreshing. Overall, not bad.
That's a little bit more common on a New England IPA versus a West Coast, though, that the hops are a little bit less presented.
I mean, every one of them is different.
True enough, but yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So, a friend of the show here, Polly, invited Dave on to speak as a resident brewer and kind of fill in some details here. Looks like Polly's back on his trusty phone.
Well, you couldn't have timed that any better. Wow. Polly, we were just talking about you.
There he is.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi, guys.
What's up, Polly?
Hey there.
I was trying to log in. I got a phone call really quick. I was like, bastards.
You're all right.
Myself all set up. All right, cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
we were
yeah.
just getting started.
Happy
You can
Monday.
hear me this time, right?
Yeah, for now. You're still crackly though, for some reason.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
there we go. I don't. Yeah, it's like coming in and out for some reason.
It's got to be the internet connection.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if that's true for everybody
Technology.
else, let me know.
It's okay on my end, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So far so good.
All right. So, Dave, my internet connection here in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, does sometimes have some issues. So if I drop out, I will come back, just so you know.
Okay.
But yeah, so we just got started talking to you about your brewery. I think it probably is a little fitting if you want to kind of wax poetic about some of the stuff you guys are doing, and beers you're proud of at the moment. Feel free.
Okay, sure. So, like everybody, we're kind of adjusting to the situation as it comes at us. It's kind of interesting. When I arrived, like I said, I am the new guy. It's a relatively new environment for me. It was primarily a taproom strong business. We did a lot of on-site per pint sales, and we do distro and canning and things. But with the recent shutdown, we've kind of pivoted a lot more into packaging and canning, and it's kind of interesting to sort of watch that shift of like a taproom heavy business shift and adapt into almost like a production facility business. I kind of keep joking to friends like, "Oh, we're a tap room that's like pretending to be a production facility now," which is interesting because like the space is limited. But it's been cool. We have mobile canning people coming out. Ironheart, I believe, is her name. They've been really awesome. And this beer I'm pretty excited about right now. Curb My Flight. It's not New England, but it's a really great, like just crushable, lower ABV IPA. Other than that, like our styles tend to be a little more on the traditional end, I would say, like German, European.
A lot of lagers.
Actually, yeah, we just did a Mexican lager that's in the tanks right now. That will probably be our next canning venture. It's sounding like, so I'm excited for that. It's called City's Mexican Lager. But yeah, we also have a small barrel age program. I don't know if I can get it. Let me see if I can.
It's moving.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna do the barrel room as like my setting, but we have a lot of stuff stored in there right now, so I'm kind of sitting in front of it. But yeah, we doing like some limited sour stuff in there. We have really great barrel aged coffee stout, barrel aged brown. Yeah. So yeah,
that is not a small number of barrels.
No, it is not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your marketing person would be very happy with where you decided to set up shop, I'm sure.
Right on.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking at it, and it looks like you guys tend more towards, like, a lot of your stuff is more sessionable.
Yeah.
Looks like lighter, kind of easy drinking. Is that kind of what your sweet spot is?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, just looking at our inventory and sales, what seems to move for us is hoppy and light. The Pilsner does really well. The pale ales, the IPAs, for sure. Right. In terms of like New Englandy stuff, which I know is kind of the focus today, we did have a beer a while back called Mercury that's sort of like stepped into that territory a bit as well. So yeah, we like the hops, but like, I have to mention Mark too. Mark Lagenza is the founder. Old school home brewer guy, came out here from Colorado, blew it up, and he makes really killer like Vienna lagers. We have a beer called Spectator that won some awards, and so yeah. But for sure, hoppy and light is kind of like what's moving and grooving.
Sure. The name On Tour, do you know where that came from?
Yeah. So like our sort of our theme, if you will, does stem a lot from touring culture, like people that are fans of the Grateful Dead and Fish and things like that. A lot of our beers are actually loosely referenced to songs and things like that. So like I know I share some of these experiences with Mark before I met him, but I know he has done a lot of concerts, running around on tour literally, as I have myself as well. So it's kind of like carrying that whole vibe into the brewery for sure. Then we do a lot of live music here. We used to host an event, like a big block party called Dancing in the Streets with bands. So we're very like tuned into music and live performance. That event is kind of up in the air with the situation with the city right now. But yeah, it's definitely like referencing that on tour lifestyle for sure.
Okay. So are you guys, it sounds like you're, getting mobile canning in, you're doing what you need to get get your product out there and everything. Has it been a rough transition, or are you guys able to, because I imagine you did some packaged material before that. Was it just amping that up, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So we were doing some canning and we had our liquor store accounts, but now it's like full on can it,
right.
get it in the, get it in cold storage and get it out the door. The community at large has been really awesome about responding to that. We have a lot of great regulars that came through, and guys like Paulie reached out to me about beer deliveries. And like the state and Illinois Liquor Commission's being really cool about actually allowing us to not only self-distribute, but like old school, milkman style, deliver cases of beer to your door. And it's been kind of flooring to me how many people have been filling these accounts. I come in the morning and I see the order slips and I see our team filling crowlers and getting canned beer ready in cases going out. And, we have regulars ordering 3-4 cases at a time sometimes. It's not the same as it was, but it's been really cool to see it shift into something positive in terms of the community responding to us pivoting into packaging beer and still getting it out. We have a lot of people calling about how can I get beer, how can I support. So that's basically that's been sort of the main thing carrying us through the tunnel so far.
Nice. Yeah,
that's so great to hear. Certainly nobody saw this coming, and
I just got my day together for tomorrow.
Awesome. See, Paulie's the man. That's what I'm talking about.
There you go. That's another week in business with Paulie.
Yeah.
Do you guys have crawlers in stock, Dave?
Say again, Paul?
Do you have crawlers in stock?
So we did, and we just ran out of them, and now we're waiting for a shipment. We're actually, I think, sharing a pallet of crowlers with Forbidden Root down the street.
I wanted to make sure of that because I had a couple questions that before I made the order. It's ask you right now. That's fine when you get them in. I'll put that on the next order.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it works,
definitely in their circle.
If it works out where we do get the crowlers like tomorrow, then we can update our list for crowler fills, and that's like our draft system, our keg lines, and not just the packaging beer, Right. But yeah, we don't want to like promise that to people and then not have crowlers. Well, crowlers are a super hot commodity right now.
That is true.
So it's been tricky on that end, but that's been cool too. Like I've been coming in and seeing, kegs getting cleared on crowler fills when we do have them. I know a lot of breweries are doing similar things with growlers and things like that because the beer's got to go somewhere,
Yeah.
Did I hear you say a minute ago that you guys were sharing a pallet of product with
really
Forbidden Root?
How much?
At
least I've noticed here in Chicago, the beer community is everybody's like getting everything locally. I can't when I do.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, the Forbidden Root guys are awesome. They're friends of ours down the street. So sometimes we do like split orders on stuff with them for sure, which is great. It's like that old school craft beer camaraderie. Let's all help each other out,
That's right where my brain went right when I heard that. And I'm like, that's so cool to hear that, in this situation that people are still sticking up for each other like that.
I guess that was my only question. The crowd is cool. I'll put my order in tomorrow morning.
All right. At least we've satisfied Paulie's needs here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave's a really good friend of mine. All right, I got my questions answered. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah.
Paulie's job is done.
Have a good podcast,
I'm trying, Paul. I know you need that barrel age, action in your life. So we'll see if we can get it going.
Yeah, I did have a question because you kind of hit on it a little bit when talking about the crowlers and everything, but and I also noticed you have your Omega hat on. Omega shut down, crowlers are in short supply. Are you guys having trouble getting, ingredients and equipment and things like that? Has that become a bit of an issue as these things shift?
I would say yes and no. On one end, I'm kind of surprised at how much things haven't stopped in terms of like, yeah, here's our grain delivery and everything's cool. But there are certain things that the market has just blown up on that are tough just on the supply and demand end. It's not because the people don't want to distribute and the guy in the truck doesn't want to get it here. It's just not available for the market, which isn't anyone's fault, you know. So,
Yeah.
like the things that come to mind are for sure crowlers, right? But also just like
Just cans in general.
cans
There's
in general.
yeah.
Scheduling a canning day, people are fighting for,
Mm-hmm.
and you know the obvious one is PPE, right? Isopropyl alcohol, U-line
yeah.
gloves. Like that's an interesting situation. There's talks of CO2 shortages. I haven't really seen it yet, but that's a concern that's buzzing around. But in terms of just raw ingredients to make beer, I haven't really seen any of that.
Yeah, and run
which
into
is
that.
good.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Yeah. So, Jason, I can imagine that the run rates on those things have just gone through the roof with everybody shifting to packaging and everything. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're left with only packaging outlets, and there's
Right.
only so many manufacturers of aluminum cans out there in the U.S. So,
Right.
Yeah.
you just the market, just kind of goes, if supply demand is what it comes down to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Things you don't think about sometimes,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
So,
whole
were
this
you
whole
guys
situation kind of that's speaks to the whole situation. So
true enough?
Yeah.
So, prior to them taking a hiatus, were you guys using Omega a lot, them being a Chicagoland yeast lab?
That's a question for me, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're kind of all over the place with our yeast sources. We've had some other breweries again help us out where we've gone and gotten yeast. I believe we have played with Omega a bit. I've used them a lot in other facilities as well. Like I think, when I was at Finch's back in the day, I remember the Omega guys showing up with jugs.
Right.
But we have a couple different sources for sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know that. I mean, you have the big players, but then you have some of your more regional players. Like around here, we have the Richmond Yeast Company, and RVA is what they're called, RVA Yeast. And you have Omega and things, and I know that Imperial is another one, and so there's a bunch of them around. But I know sometimes people like to pick a certain vendor and kind of keep with them, for consistency's sake and things. So I wasn't sure if you guys kind of went down that road or not.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I don't think we have any kind of like exclusivity for that type of thing when it comes to yeast.
Sure.
Which is fun to play around with different options for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So,
Can we talk about your home brewing beginnings?
yeah.
Who you guys use?
Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, was that a question for
Yeah.
me as well?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
the funny thing, the irony is I don't have a ton of home brewing beginnings.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
And it was sort of a matter of, I had home brewed a bit. Like I did a couple batches with my brother. We did the Mr. Beer thing. We had an extract kit. And I think our first batch, we both decided was terrible. And then he just gave up. And I was like, well, beer's still cool. And I still like to drink it, but maybe we don't have to brew it all the time. But then I actually used to go over to Polly's a bit and mess around. So I had like buddies that were serious home brewers. And I would just kind of like hang out and learn stuff. But I didn't like have a rig at home and a mash tun and all this stuff. And then I ended up, I was bouncing around playing music for a couple years, just kind of working factory jobs, odds and ends. And I ended up answering a Craigslist ad for Finch's and jumped on their can line. So
Oh wow.
it was just like a weird, like right place, right time thing. And they were like, hey, you like beer? You like craft beer? I'm like, yeah. They're like, do you have any brewing experience or homebrew experience? I was like, no, not really. And they were like, okay, great. You're hired. End of the can line, And it was just like hack tacks and like loading boxes and pallets. Like, all right, well, you can't mess nothing up too bad over there. You know what I mean? So that was cool. And then I started kind of bugging the brewers more and more about recipe stuff and nerding out with them. And they were like, oh, this guy's into it. And, eventually a position opened up and I came over to the assistant brewer side and just progressed onward from there. So it's weird. I went backwards on it. I learned how to brew on a 30 barrel system. And
my God.
And then was kind of like, oh, maybe it'd be cool to buy a homebrew rig with some friends and mess around. I've recently bought a Brewer's Edge thing and I'm figuring stuff out still at home. It's
Oh, wow.
it's funny, but I wasn't really that guy who did tons of home brewing and then jumped into the beer scene. I just was I'm a factory worker, and it was packaging into brewing and so on and so forth.
So that's really interesting to me. So what's the learning curve from going to from a 30 barrel system to a home brewing rig?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same concept, right? You're still mashing it. You're still making wort. It's just in a huge vessel versus a little one. But I think the biggest thing is like recipe tweaking. I got pretty good at learning how to tweak with hops and stuff in the boil. And then if you sort of take that same ripping elf acid efficiency to your little tiny boil kettle, it's probably gonna be kind of crazy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I have ran into weird issues with just how I look at downscaling. But yeah, I actually think it's a great way to learn to brew. If you could jump into a 5, 7, 10 barrel system and see the mash tun and see a fermenter ripping, you know what I mean? Because it's just even cellaring, I think, is really interesting to learn like that, because you're doing yeast dumps and cleaning tanks and stuff versus just racking over in a carboy or something.
Sure. Sure.
But I still listen to podcasts all the time. I listened to a podcast last night with Randy Moshner and some Beersmith guys, and it's just they're so much farther advanced in some of the homebrew concepts and techniques and equipment. But it's anything, whether you're on a huge facility, a small facility, you're taking a step back, you're looking at the process. It's making beer, you're mashing in, turn it into wort, boil it, hops, ferment it out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then we get to cheat with speed a little bit because the CO2 and carbonation and things like that. But that's been probably the trickier stuff for me, is learning secondary fermentation and on home brewing and bottle conditioning and things like that. Yeah.
Right.
So do you guys ferment under pressure?
Not really. We got, the blow off's open, you know what I'm saying? And the bucket's bubbling away at the end of the hose.
Right.
But then when you get, I have done some stuff like that at other breweries, at Lagunitas, their tanks are under pressure because they're huge. And then when I have done New England stuff, if you want to jump into that, I've done some cool stuff where you bung up the end of your fermentation, right? After a dry hop maybe, and sort of get that natural thing bubbling up and going on there. But typically it's in the tank with an open blow off until it's fermented out.
Yeah, I've seen some people that actually are fermenting and, under pressure in the primary, and it's supposed to help with the yeast propagation and stuff, because it's true anaerobic environment and everything. But I've not played with it myself at all, so I was curious if you guys did that.
For me, I would say it depends on the system and the beer style. You know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. Well, Paulie is either having technical difficulties or he really did get his question answered.
And just called it a day.
Yeah.
So George and I were, we got our start in home brewing about 5 years ago, and we started doing this podcast shortly afterwards. And participating in homebrew clubs and doing this podcast has really expanded our knowledge of home brewing, and we wanted this to be kind of a setting to share ideas. And along the way, we've met a ton of people, Paulie being one of them, and many people that ended up being either opening breweries or turning into a full-time career working at a brewery, which everyone's got a unique story about that. I could speak from my own experience real quick, and George can too, because I did have the opportunity to brew on a large system about a year ago from some brew club members of mine.
Nice.
My big, and we were talking about learning curves a second ago. Yeah. My big learning curve was the transferring of liquids from vessel to vessel, Because I've never had a small pump that's done any transfer.
I was going to say, in terms of using pumps and hookups and things like that, yeah, for sure.
That was a big thing for me. But to your point, besides that, all the big picture stuff is all the same. It's only a matter of what scale you're operating on.
No, I think you're totally right, and I think that also happens from different facility to facilities that I've worked at, depending on the size of the system.
Okay.
Like for instance, coming from Lagunitas, I was mainly a filtration guy over there, and my job was to pull beer from one side of the building to the other, run it through a centrifuge, hit it with some filtration aids, run it through a giant press, carb it in line, throw it in a bright tank. But you're not hooking up a small pump with hoses to do that. This is all like a hard piped in panel thing, and you're opening valves that's grabbing beer from the other side of the factory half a football field away, and then there's a computer HMI that you're looking at your pump diagrams and things like that. So like that kind of blew my mind coming into that world, from like hooking up hoses and pumps and things like that to like, oh, now it's opening up this and running over here and going on the computer. And it kind of felt like relearning brewing, or at least that side of, pumps and flow systems for sure. So I kind of totally can relate to like being a little overwhelmed at first by that stuff, but it's a pump takes liquid in here, sends it out here at that many hertz, whether it's big, huge, or a little chugger pump at your home brew, it's still functioning is the same. So once you kind of get rid of that anxiety behind it, again, you're just moving liquid around, right?
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. No, it's very true.
George had his first experience on a large system fairly recently too.
Nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Now,
Now, when you say large, mine wasn't it wasn't a 30 barrel, it was a 3-barrel system. But that's still, going from 5 gallons, that's still, a significant step up there. So, but yeah, there's a local brewery that opened up not too long ago, and I've been helping out as a, kind of a consultant brewer on their stuff, helping them with getting some recipes together and doing stuff.
Cool. And I find that too, by the way, like home brewers are awesome at recipe development, right? Because that's like what you're doing and geeking out to. Whereas I've met a lot of guys like me that have learned how to brew on huge systems, but maybe didn't go to school for it or whatever. And it's like that and the science and everything else. Like there's just straight worker factory guys, and then there's like the recipe guys. And I always kind of find the really good recipe guys are usually killer home brewers or started that way. You know what I mean?
Right.
Everyone's using Beersmith. I mean, regardless of what, how much beer you're making, everybody's using it.
Totally.
Yeah. A lot of people are, yeah, for sure. So we like to say that the home brewing kind of brings out the MacGyver in us. We do some chemistry, but we have to improvise a lot and just pull things out of the air with a paper clip and some rubber bands and things. Is it a little bit more stable from that aspect when you're at the scale you are, or do you find yourself still having to MacGyver stuff together?
Still MacGyvering for sure.
That's good to hear.
Even like
that doesn't change.
It's just like it's just stuff goes wrong, and whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and like you don't have perfect brew days or setbacks, and that's one of the cool things. Like last week we had an issue with the stuck mash. It happens, right? And I was like, well, what do we do? This is the first time I've seen this. I'm the new guy, new system. So I was consulting with Mark, the owner, and he's like, well, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to reset the mash, and then we're going to get it going, and blah, blah, blah. And it was awesome to sort of see him take a step back, figure that problem out, and then move forward. But a lot of people have that misconception, like, even at huge facilities, I was talking about Lagunitas a minute ago and how integrated their system is, but all that means is there's more stuff that can break. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's very automated for sure, but automation goes wrong. And if you have 10,000 valves in a facility, guess what? Some of them are going to glitch up, and you're going to be jumping on the walkie-talkie and calling maintenance. Whereas as a home brewer, you're like, cool, this hose is hooked up wrong. And, it's just, again, it's like the same kind of stuff, just at different scale. But I find that Bigger systems still make mistakes. You still have to deal with it. There's always the MacGyver juggle, like in every brewing job I've ever had, honestly.
That's actually that's oddly comforting to me.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. Like there's problems forever. But like people get really good at dealing with it without freaking out. And that's like what makes awesome brewers. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh shit, this pump broke and now I'm just gonna go home and cancel the beer day. It's like, no, you gotta figure it out, man, And that's a learning curve for sure. Like I'm not an electrical engineer or a plumber or you know what I mean? So some of that stuff I definitely have to take a step back and consult with people on. But it's cool to learn more and more about that as you progress into different systems.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well,
that's kind of sinking in, and I think where my brain is going is there's something to be said about your ability to kind of adapt and MacGyver things, is kind of a direct correlation to, the level of brewer that you're eventually going to become.
Absolutely. For
because
sure.
Nothing's ever going to go totally to plan. Never.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that comes up in job interviews a lot too. Like they're like, well, how do you deal with stuff going wrong and troubleshooting? And are you familiar with fixing things like this? It's like, they don't just want to hear like, yeah, every homebrew I've done went perfect, so it's going to be great here, and let me roll my sleeves up and go. They want to hear about the stuff that went wrong and how you dealt with it,
That's a great point.
If any homebrewer walks in and says, every homebrew I did went perfect,
no,
they're either a unicorn or they're lying.
Or lying. Yes,
well,
exactly right.
Some people will have that misconception to take that attitude in a job interview. Like they don't want to talk about the things that went wrong or what their faults are or not good at and how they overcame it. And it's like, no, man, that's what they want to figure out is how you dealt with the issues,
Right. Yeah, no, that's life, man. So, hey, speaking of which, you talked about Spectator and you said it won a few awards. You kind of buried the lead a little bit. You guys won a silver medal at the Great American Beer Festival. That's nothing to.
All right.
It's nothing to, turn your nose up at. That's really good.
I can't take any credit for it because, like I said, I just got here. I'm the new guy, but
a little bit before your time, but that's all right.
That did happen. It is a thing, and we do have medals. So cheers to Mark Legenza again for that. He also won. One of the things that blew me away was we won. I think it was like best new brew pub in America, like a year after they opened, and then that's kind of like why I started coming around and hanging out here. Like I used to hang out and drink here and meet Mark and meet the brewers and stuff because I was like, who are these new guys crushing all these awards? You know what I mean? What's going on over here? And like, sure enough,
right?
Bellied up to the bar. The beers are awesome. I just remember thinking, man, this would be a cool place to work. And then like years later, the position opened up and boom. But yeah, all that award stuff for sure credited to Mark, who is a old school home brewer guy. One of the really interesting things about him is, so what you were talking about earlier with transitioning, is he just went from home brewing to this business. There wasn't like, a bunch of places that he was employed at brewery wise before. And then he came out the gate winning all these awards. So again, it's like home brewers are awesome and making beers and coming up with killer recipes,
Yeah. Jason, do we want to go to the New England conversation, or I saw that they have one thing that I did want to ask a question on, up to you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm gonna step out real quick.
Yeah.
I just got to grab a charger for my computer and probably grab a beer, but I'll be right back. I just want to get that stuff. Okay.
Not a problem.
No problem.
You do your thing, man.
Cool.
All right. So I went over, while we're waiting for him, I went to Home Depot this weekend. That's why I called you.
Okay.
And raided their plumbing section for some for some CPVZ to finish up my Herms and sparging setup that we talked about before. So
do you have pictures?
A few ideas on how? Not yet. It's not
just
together.
the materials.
It's just parts at the moment.
Got it.
But,
okay.
I've got two plans. One is a kind of a spike down of because I found they have CPVC to NPT adapters. So NPT adapters is what we use all the time. Is male and female NPT, And so I grabbed that, and so one thing that I'm planning on doing is a single CPVC pipe down, and have that and drilling holes in like kind of a circular pattern down so it can sprinkle out from there.
Sure.
And the other one is to go down a little bit and then go out to a manifold to be able to do that. And I'm going to build both and see how they operate, but the manifold one, I'm actually thinking about using more as a sparge setup because I think that's going to be more prone to clogging and harder to clean if I use it for the Herm setup. Whereas the other one, I can just kind of turn upside down on my bottle, the bottle cleaner that hooks onto the faucet and kind of clean it out real quick. So I think I might use each one slightly differently.
CPVZ. No, CPV.
No.
CPVC. Jeez, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, they had to pick those letters, right? Because they all sound similar. But yeah, the white PVC piping that you see everywhere.
Of course, yeah.
CPVC is typically what they'll use in modern plumbing. Its temperature tolerances are a little bit higher, and it allows for so especially on the hot side of a hot water heater and things, you'll find the CPVC in there.
Okay.
So I chose that because, Herm's setup, you're typically doing that at, between 140 and 160 degrees.
True.
So I wanted to make sure that it could handle it.
All right. So you're ready for Big Brew Day then? Well, almost.
I'm
You got the
working on
materials for Big Brew Day.
Got the materials. So tomorrow I think I'm gonna set it up and do a test run against my system with just some hot water and see how it runs.
All right.
So,
all right. Take pictures, please.
I will. So.
This is a huge Big Brew Day. There's a lot of firsts that are coming up on this.
There is, yeah. Did you get your pump yet?
It's ordered.
It's ordered.
The ETA to arrive here is somewhat unknown and somewhat unclear. So
okay,
that's that. So we'll see.
Right.
I got a lot of stuff on order too, including all my disconnects and all that stuff. So,
what kind of pump did you grab, Jason?
So let me look it up. I was torn between a couple of them because on the last episode of the webcast, we talked about a pump that had built-in flow control.
Cool.
And you pay a premium for it, of course. And I ended up not going quite as advanced as that. I got kind of a baseline chugger pump.
Yeah.
And with that, I had to buy a whole bunch of at George's suggestion. I bought a whole bunch of quick disconnects and high temperature tubing,
nice.
Which should simplify kind of the the utilizing of it. So we'll see. I just there's a lot that's going to have to come together between now and Saturday for Big Brew Day. So, but that's the hope. That's what we're building towards.
Yeah, I need to get on the quick disconnect thing myself on my home brew. I don't want to be reaching for the screwdriver and the clamp, man. It's over. Like, I hate it. You know what I mean? It's just, you do like one batch like that and you're like, well, this is terrible, so that's definitely a game changer to be able to just whack that on and off real quick.
Totally.
It's changed my entire brew day having those, let me tell you.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to him about what I'm doing because I'm actually upgrading from a straight infusion mash system to a Herm system at the moment.
Cool.
So that's the apparatus I'm building right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
So can we ask some questions about New England's? Is that okay?
Let's do it.
All right. So just starting at a very basic level, and I freely admit in this topic I have a lot to learn. I'm not making a New England this weekend, but I plan to for my next brew day.
Cool.
There is some noticeable differences between a regular brew day and a brew day where you're making something hazy like this. So can you talk a little bit about where the differences are? I imagine it's largely with the hop additions and a whirlpool and chilling. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is like your mash. You guys were talking about mash temp and things like that, of course. But also,
Mhm.
what are you putting in your grist bin? I think one of the best go-to things for New England style would be definitely to add some type of oats to your grist.
Okay.
That can really contribute to a lot of that nice, like my guy in Jersey used to call it a pillowy mouthfeel, right? You get that.
Mhm.
But there's also a lot of science about like the dry hop interacting with that later in polyphenols, and they're still kind of studying that. But in terms of boil, for sure, big emphasis on later versus earlier additions. I think the whole reason that style maybe caught on as hard as it did is because people were, I don't want to say sick of IPAs because that's still not true for sure. But
Mhm.
I think people started getting a little burnt out on the IBUs and the bittering end of it. So
I agree.
to sort of say, you know, maybe we don't need all these early 90, 60-minute additions that, you know, are really high alpha acid based hops. Let's play around with the end of boils. So you get later boil additions for sure. And when I say later, I'm talking like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, you know, not
Okay.
not
Okay.
30, not an hour, like late, you know what I mean? And then real heavy on the whirlpool. There's a lot of guys that are trying to quickly like chill that wort down a little bit even during the whirlpool, because even you figure you start your whirlpool after a boil, okay, you're coming from your 212-ish, you're maybe coming down to like 190s, but you're still at a pretty high temp that's pulling a lot of those alpha acid compounds out. So some guys have
Sure.
experimented with some temperature drops. That, of course, comes down to what kind of equipment you have. I never really messed with that too much. I just was like, all right, let's throw a lot in at the end of the boil and heavy duty on the whirlpool, and then a heavy duty dry hop later on. But that's a little bit more cellaring side. I don't want to jump too far ahead of your brew day. So in terms, to answer your question, for sure, like the boil additions when you add the hops, I think is super important. Which hops you choose to use. You're looking for those tropical fruit tone forward aromas and flavor. So like obvious ones are, you know, your Chinook, your Citra, your Mosaics. I love El Dorado, Azaka, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Got it right here in this guy.
hell
El
yeah.
Dorado.
Yeah. That's a great hop. But yeah, I think the big trick there is late boil for sure, / whirlpool.
So is every New England brew day going to have a whirlpool, or is that just kind of the recommendation?
I would recommend it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That we've also heard, like you said, not to jump too far ahead, but we've also heard that the dry hopping process tends to happen a little bit more in the primary than it does
Yeah.
traditionally in the secondary fermentation.
Good
Is
question.
that your
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of hinted at that earlier when you asked about fermenting under pressure. And I was like, well, it depends what you're doing, what kind of style. And I think that is important for this style because typically you would like go all the way to terminal, let it hang out a bit, hit it with your dry hop, go on with your life. But with this, you actually want that, just that, not like right away, but that tail end of fermentation. There's still some action there. You know what I mean? And so
Okay.
you throw the hops in, and it's doing a couple things. It's giving it an opportunity to react with the beer itself, the yeast, which is probably going to be a low flocculating strain, by the way. But it's like you don't really have to like grab a CO2 hose and rouse it from the bottom so much because you're letting the beer do that on its own, and it's bunged
Okay.
up. So everything's getting trapped and interacting with each other in that movement as it's bunged up. And I think that's where the knowledge on my end drops off a little bit on the science, but you get into like polyphenols of, you know, that stuff with the oats I was talking about earlier and how that comes into play now with these hops. And there's like chains that are grabbing onto each other and sticking to each other because they're stuck and they're not blowing up and out. You know what I mean? So I think that is an important element of it that's like a weird sort of finesse to capture that, like, it's almost fermented, but not quite. Boom, dry hop, bung it up, let it do its thing.
Well, you also mentioned just briefly that you use a low flocculation yeast, and I know that in large part, like oats and in wheat additions, kind of contribute to the haziness. But a
Yeah,
low flocculation yeast, where it's not clumping up as much and
yeah,
dropping out, is that
for
kind
sure.
of contribute to that as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, to sort of put it in like a obvious, um, you have more yeast in suspension, and so that's going to be hazier, right? Because it didn't
Hmm.
all pack down to the cone of your fermenter or whatever else. But it's funny. It's like now that this style is so popular, some brewers are struggling with even that, and they're like, "Oh, my haze fell out," because it still drops out in your cold crash, and what I mean, which to me isn't a problem. I'm not like, "Oh, well, you lost the haze, bro." You know what I mean? If it tastes great, I don't really
Right.
care. You know what I mean? Uh, but yeah, like I read an interview with the Heady Topper guy a while back. He's out there like, I didn't really like try to invent this whole thing on purpose. We just used this yeast strain and did this dry hop and didn't use any filtration or centrifuges, and we're careful about how we carbonated it, and boom, it blew up. So it's like, it's interesting to me that the haze is like the thing that people are going after, whereas I'm just personally more interested in the hop aroma and flavors themselves. But like yeast
Yeah,
strand,
because I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, so go ahead.
I mean,
I
yeast
was gonna say
strains anyway. Like the ones that come to mind are like your Conan, your Bavarians, your those. They hang out, and the longer they hang out, the longer they're messing around with that dry hop that you bugged out. You know what I mean? So that's
Right.
doing its thing
Hmm.
versus all of it dropping out and getting dumped.
Yeah, because what I was gonna say is because when I think about a New England, yes, hazy's one of the first things that comes to mind. But the other thing that comes to mind for me is it's a distinct. It's not quite thick, but it is a distinct mouthfeel from the West Coast version, and the hop profile is usually radically different. Like it's more along the lines of fruity, much less hit you in the face bitterness. Like the
Right.
bitterness is still there, but that profile is different. So, hazy is important because visual impact is definitely something that people take into account when they're thinking about beer, and doesn't conform to style and everything. But there's a lot more to it than what I think some people give credit for when we start talking about the New England IPA style.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I'm not really that interested in the turbidity factor of the final product. Like I kind of just felt like the history of that was, well, we're using this yeast strain, we're doing these techniques with hops, we got some oats and stuff in here for mouthfeel, and if this is what it looks like, this is what it looks like. But they weren't like
Right.
dumping flour in their mash to like try to achieve that,
Right.
And so now that it's really popular, there's guys doing stuff like that, and it's like, oh, look at
Yeah.
the haze, or it's not hazy enough, and you know, let's face it, anytime any style gets really popular and everyone starts doing it, there's going to be a lot of liquid that's just kind of questionable and not that great.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it might look like orange juice, but what does it taste like? And yeah, it tastes great, but it's not hazy enough. Well, who cares? Because it's a great
Right.
beer. So it dropped out a little bit. Like, to me, that's really not like the part of the style that's exciting or to be strived for. In fact, when I first started learning about it, it was like a big controversy because so many brewers were getting upset about people not respecting clarity and filtration and this and that. But on the other end of that, it's like, well, there's reasons why these guys chose not to filter that because they didn't want to lose those magical hop flavors and compounds. Like they
Right.
did that for aroma and flavor, not so that it looks like whatever. That was to me just almost like coincidental. And I think it's like a thing that's over focused on now. And everyone's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
let's make it look like this. Let's make it look like this. But I don't care what it looks like. I want to know what it tastes and smells like.
Well, I think part of it too is I've got this long-standing thing where I think one of the worst things that happened to computer and internet technology as we let marketing people into it. And I think part of that is also seeped over into this is like it's a lot harder to explain to somebody that the style is got this certain hop profile and this mouth feel and everything. If you can say, look, this is hazy, it's in New England, it's a
Yeah.
little bit more obvious to people, which is why I think a lot of people have kind of keyed in on that as one of the defining features.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
for me, it's bizarre because I was in Jersey doing these beers, and I was like, I don't know, Kyle, my boss at the time, I was even like, this looks pretty weird, man. I don't know, you know what I mean? But then, like, I'm drinking them, and they taste awesome. And it's funny to watch people's reactions at the bar, be like, hey, man, something's wrong with this beer. I don't know if it's the bottom of the keg or what, like sending it back. And you're like having to educate them now, like, oh, no, we did that on purpose. It's style and whatever. But now, like in Chicago, even I see the opposite happen. I had a bartender, I won't say where, but he told me a story where he's like, I think it's over for me, man. I'm done with the industry. I go, why? What happened? He's like, people are sending back beers because they're not hazy enough, bro. And it's like this strange, like it went from like, hey man, what the hell is this? To hey man, what the hell is this? On like the other end of the spectrum. And I was like, why did that even ever matter? But you're right, it is like how you recognize the style now, right? Yeah. So it is part of it, like to be fair, you know what I mean? But like what I'm really interested in even is beers that aren't necessarily hazy, but still utilize those techniques with the hops. Like I've had a couple half acre beers that were really killer like that, had that really nice, prominent, juicy whirlpool, dry hoppy thing going on, but it still looks like an IPA, and ironically enough, I find the larger breweries have a harder time making it look like haze because they have like centrifuges and filtration and things like that.
Right.
And that's a whole nother like debate and like, oh, well, how do we make it hazier? And I'm like, you don't. You're a huge facility with equipment to not make it like that. But you could still make a really great, like juicy, aroma-driven hoppy beer. Like, I don't know. I think it's kind of disheartening when beers get knocked for not being hazy enough, even though they taste awesome, or maybe the other way around. It's all over the place now.
Yeah, no, and aside from not centrifuging, not filtering those beers, the one thing that I've heard some breweries doing to keep the haze is to limit their cold crash. They won't cold crash it all the way down.
That makes sense in terms of your flocculation and trying to keep things in suspension. But yeah, I've heard of brewers losing the haze over that. They're like, oh, I cold crash it. Now it looks like a regular beer. And I'm like, well, so what? It's still awesome. It is like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a beer, dude. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So it does kind of, re-raise an interesting topic that Jason and I have talked about periodically is, do we have in the industry too much of a reliance on the style guides that we should be looking, instead of I need to make an IPA or I need to make a New England or something like that, do we need to just make beer, and use it more as just super loose guidelines rather than the somewhat more strict guidelines we use them as today?
Right. Like a New England is a style. A lot of people wanted to pretend like it wasn't going to be for a second, but it is. It's here to stay, and it has descriptors attached to what qualifies as a New England. I totally get that and respect that. But like, if a guy makes a beer with all these great whirlpool additions we were just talking about and bunging up the firm and all this stuff, but then cold crashes it and centrifuges it, is it not within style anymore? Like, is there like a turbidity threshold that's going to disqualify him for having too little parts per million in suspension or something? Like, that sounds a little ridiculous to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I heard you mention a second ago, and this was a question I was going to ask about New England specifically. Is this a style that's here to stay? And kind of the reason I bring that up, and George and I have talked about this at length, is it seems like every year there's a new go-to beer style. And New England was huge on the scene within the last probably 12 to 18 months. To this point, it certainly has kept its prominence and has stood up while, others kind of had their season and then kind of kind of went away. Is New England here to stay?
I think so. Yeah, I
Okay.
hear enough people come in and ask for it, and like I was joking about earlier, people used to go from, "Hey, what the hell is this? I'm leaving," to, "Oh, you don't have any hazy New Englands? Well, then I'm leaving."
Yeah.
And anytime that
Right.
happens, let's face it, people are looking at trends, and it's not just about making beers that you like. Like I would
Mhm.
love to make just crisp pills and lagers all the time to crush after work, but like people want to come in and drink these styles, and so you're responding to the market, especially now more
Oh,
than
of
ever
course.
stuff. So
Yeah.
the market's forcing it to stay, whether brewers like it or not, and some of them do, some of them don't, whatever. But
Mhm.
people like that beer, man. Like I went to the craft beer conference in Denver a year ago, and there's all these like nerdy discussions and talks you get to sign up for. And I don't know if you guys have been or anything, but it's pretty cool. They have some stuff online about it that I'm catching up on this year because it's all online. But they had their seminar on like New England's, like everything we're talking about right now, techniques, brewing, how to do it, cool. And it was by far the like most um, attended conference. Like they were like, oh, there's only capacity for 180 people, and there's like 200 and some people in this room right now, and there's all these dudes like standing against the wall, like, well, I'm not leaving. It was like it was like a fire capacity issue. They're like, if you didn't sign up for this class, get out of here. And like everybody was just so into it because I mean, this is at the peak of it, and everyone's doing it and whatever. But that I think is telling, right there that it's like the market is demanding it to stay, and it's selling and it moves. So why would it go away if it's crushing through your bright tank in a week and you're making money? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I totally get it, and I agree. It's it the market has demanded it. There's no question about it. It's made its mark to this point. It's withstood the test of time, and if people are asking for it and that part is not changing, then it fits that description of just being there to stay. So there it is. Do you
So-
have any insight to what could be next? Like, what is the
a
next
good
New
question.
England?
I think the next New England is kind of what I've been talking about, is like hop forward, juicy forward beers that aren't necessarily hazy.
Okay.
I think there's
That makes-
still a demographic of people that are weirded out by the haze, like itself. Like, oh, this
I
is
agree.
delicious, but it's kind of murky, and you know what I mean? So,
Right.
like, you have your craft beer guys that are like all about it and super stoked on the haze scene, and that's great. But like your average non-craft beer person that you're trying to sort of like gateway into the scene on that first flight or whatever, I think a lot of those people are still intimidated by a beer that looks like orange juice.
True.
So
Right.
what I'm starting to see is a trend of like the part of that style that's sticking around is less IBUs, less bitterness, higher hop flavor and aroma, but not necessarily with that heavy duty turbidity.
So we call that a Mid-Atlantic IPA.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
started in Virginia.
I have heard like Midwest IPA being thrown around, and
Yeah.
it's,
Oh
it's
my
kind of,
gosh.
like,
it's like
in between. Yeah.
Is that
yeah,
yeah,
and
I
like
like it.
to be fair, that's kind of like how our beer I was talking about earlier. We don't have it on right now, or I'd be drinking it for the podcast. But we had a beer called Mercury, and that's what it was. It was like, the hops are tropical style hops and later addition, and the dry hops heavy duty, and we might bung it up. And I don't remember what the yeast was because I wasn't here yet, but it wasn't like, oh, we're going for this super crazy turbid thing. But it like hinted at that, and it was great. It wasn't like super hazy, but it wasn't like a West Coast either.
Right.
And so I think those beers are cool and kind of catching traction right now as like a kind of comfortable middle of the road, if you will.
Midwestern
So I was
IPA?
talking
I
with
love that.
Yeah, man.
I was talking with that brewer I mentioned over the weekend about some recipes and everything, and we were talking about market forces and how much do you just make what the locals, especially if you're tap room driven, just make what the locals like, and how much do you kind of experiment and things? Because I've seen there's a couple breweries around here, one in particular that I can think of that has gone to the extreme of just making what the locals like.
Sure.
And the result is there really hasn't been anything new on the menu. And for somebody like me that likes to experiment and try new things, it's boring,
Yeah. No,
And
yeah.
so I guess the question is like, what is that balance, and how do you strike that balance as a brewery of having those things that that the market wants or likes, as well as kind of exposing them to new things to kind of expand their palate and expand what your options are for brewing.
Sure. And I won't mention names, but I can think of some similar breweries out here where they've laid maybe a little too heavily on some modern trends, if you will. Like, you know, if all you're making is New England haze and pastry stouts, that's great. You're probably going to make a lot of money for about a year or two. But then what happens when that trend shifts? Do you just roll with it and say, oh, this is what's popular now and this is what makes money, so we're doing that? Okay, but then what about all those guys that just love the haze and pastry stouts that you're no longer now making because you're making the new cool thing, right? So, like, to your point, I think it's important to find that balance. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, there's this new weird style that we don't really know a lot about yet, but we're going to give it a go because people are into it. But I do think you still have to have a traditional, I don't want to say normal beer portfolio because I don't know what that means anymore. But like here, we make traditional styles. Okay, like we have a brown ale that's called 1725 because that's when the recipe is from, 1725, and it's great.
Wow.
So it's like I don't need that to be messed with, man. I don't need you to give me a New England dry hop brown ale or like whatever. So
Man, just thinking
But
about
New
that.
England dry hop brown ale.
right, like that would be terrible. But I like New England IPAs too. So I like going to breweries that do both, but have like one hand in tradition and then reaching the other hand out into what's happening now, but not going too far in either direction. And I think those are the people that are really going to make it through a turbulent market because you have a wide spectrum available for different types of drinkers. It's like there's crazy like exclusive sour funk factory breweries that is definitely a niche thing, and then there's like the breweries that's like, okay, if you like Coors Light, check it out, here's a Kolsch. Okay, you like that Kolsch, here's an IPA. Like, I still love transitioning people into craft beer like that. And if you're leaning too far in one direction, I think that gets a little scary for both you as a business and the consumer's experience because you're limiting what their range is.
Yeah,
Well
not
said.
to sound too after school special about it, but craft beer is a great gateway drug when it comes to people that are used to the mass market beers. You come in, you try this, and the bartender's like, here's this tiny little sample of something you've never tried before, and they try it, and sometimes they'll latch on to it, and all of a sudden they're interested in Belgians, and they're interested in English styles and things like that, whereas before it was all American pilsners. So that's there's a part of me that says a craft brewery, especially in an area where people don't get a lot of exposure to those, a mandate is a little far, but they have kind of it's in their best interest to expose people to those different things rather than just having a German or something like that on there. And I think that's probably, that's what I'm saying is like, have those things. Like the what we were discussing was he wants to have a good selection of craft German stuff. Like he wants a Pilsner, he wants a Kolsch, he wants a which I know Pilsner is somewhat debatable, but there's a couple in there that he wants, and he wants to experiment and have some seasonal stuff. And I think that's the right way to go. Is you have those and you expose people to different things, and you expand the palate and you expand your ability to sell beer into that market.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So, But yeah, all right.
Well, Paulie got his order in, and he
Yeah, he's out. It's over. He's like,
yeah, I think
It's
he's
all right.
been having some issues.
yeah,
Yeah.
he has. He's been texting me throughout this conversation.
yeah, he just wanted to make sure I had his beer ready for him, and that's
Right.
it.
Yeah.
See if you had any
Um,
crowlers. Yeah.
But yeah, if I could throw a quick plug in about that, we are delivering to the Chicagoland suburbs for the first time ever this Wednesday. We currently do door to door like throughout the city of Chicago within city limits.
Okay.
And then a lot of cool people like Paulie have been reaching out and saying, you know, hey, what's up with the suburbs? I love you guys. Can we get some beer? We used to come up there all the time, which again is showing a lot about the community responding to us in this situation, which is awesome. So we're kind of giving it like a trial run go to swing up into the north and south suburbs this Wednesday. I believe orders have to be in, I think, by like 11 o'clock on Tuesday. But basically, it's like if it goes well, then it'll be worthwhile next time. So I hope it goes well and we can keep throwing beer around the suburbs for guys like Paulie and everybody else.
Where can we find you guys?
So right now it's Chicagoland area, but we're expanding to the burbs on our delivery routes.
Do you have a website and social media pages?
Oh yeah, so it'd be ontourebrewing.com, and all the info, directions about ordering and everything will be on there for sure.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those things.
Yep, all the goods, all the basics. Yeah.
So you did some packaging before. Was that just for in-house sale, or did you?
Yeah, mostly, but we do have accounts, and we
Okay.
do sell beer to liquor stores, and we self-distro like that. But like I said, it's definitely been ramped up and pivoted into an increased strategy, if you will, to get more beer in a can and out the door. And it's been cool too. Like we don't have to sell all this to a distributor in a liquor store because all these cool people are ordering cases directly to their front porch, you know?
And that would have been just from the ABC. That would have just been the biggest no. You can't.
Oh, they're
do
letting
that.
it rip now because it's just like it's such a weird time that I think it's like kind of. There was an official statement. I don't want to speak for them, but I know it's allowed. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like you're getting at like there is a 3-tier no there, and you got to do this and distribute that and whatever. And yeah, with this situation at hand, they've actually been really cool about kind of flexing on that, from what I understand.
So
That's good to hear.
seeing that the Chicagoland area has not turned into a lawless wasteland because of it, do you think that they will?
Well, that's debatable, but
The
True
lawless
True enough.
It's very true.
I didn't say Chicago City. Yeah, I mean the whole Chicagoland area. But anyway, do you think that after this is over, that some of that might remain?
That's
that's
an important question that unfortunately I do not have the answer to. But that's been discussed internally. Is like what happens after this is end with this model. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I honestly don't know yet how.
Would you guys prefer that?
I don't think anybody else does either. And I think that's the ultimate question for everybody is nobody predicted this when it came on the onset.
Right.
Nobody predicted exactly how people would, come up with a contingency plan to, keep the economy running during this whole time. And honestly, like this has been such a weird experience for everybody to such an extent that what the next step looks like, nobody knows.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's cool that we can deliver beer to people's doorsteps and run around and do all that. I don't see why we wouldn't want to keep doing that, but I don't know what's going to be tolerated, or if people are even going to order beer like that after this to support that on the supply and demand end, right? Like people are doing it on purpose right now to support us, and yeah, it's also super convenient because it comes right to you. Like we don't really mess with the curbside thing, but I don't know if people will continue to expect or order beer delivery after this is all over because they could just come here and support us, right? Like they were before this.
Sure.
So like that's interesting too. Like how's that going to look with people returning to the tap room and whatever else? Because that's what a lot of it is. It's our tap room regulars that we're delivering to now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in, say 6 months as these things really start to, uh, I mean, cross your fingers earlier than that, but let's
I
say,
just hope it doesn't take
Yeah.
that long. Really,
yeah,
I think we're all in the
but
same boat.
But
yeah,
the
but
ABC and the ILC and guys like that might put out a statement and say, "Okay, party's over on all that," and here's
They might.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
They might. That
Yeah.
would be a bit disappointing, seeing that these models work, and because really the ABC is supposed to be there to make sure that these things don't go off the rails. That they're a regulation body to make sure that you guys don't turn into moonshiners, basically. And
Yeah.
but if there's a way to do it, and I think we're proving now that there is, if there's a way to do it that isn't the strict distributor model, then why go back to that other than protecting the distributors, and
Which is important too, though, right? Like we don't want to ruin our relationship with distributors and distribution on that end either. So
Right.
it's definitely like a fine line. Like if I was on the distributor side of the fence right now, I don't know if I'd be too happy about all these breweries throwing cases around like they are.
yeah.
But it is what it is. We have good relationships with them too, so it's like we're kind of like in and out of both worlds on that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time. 2020 is already interesting. Let's be honest about that. But I think the latter half of 2020 is going to be interesting to see how much back to quote unquote let's say pre-COVID normal we actually go back to, and what changes come of this. I think there's going to be a lot of books written on it if I had to guess.
100%. They're already being written, and
Yeah.
they will continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right.
So Dave, thank you very much. We very much appreciate you.
Dave,
you
this was
coming on.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This all
Right
came
on.
together.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, this all came together within the last 24 hours. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we even answered Polly's question.
Yes,
So-
exactly. And he's got beer coming too, which is awesome too.
As long as Paulie gets beer at the end of the day, I'm happy. That's the most important thing.
You want to throw out your website one more time, Dave? OnTourBrewing.com?
That's correct.
And the sales out to the suburbs going on this week?
Yeah, so you can put your order in now, between now and I think 11 p.m. Tuesday night. And
Okay.
then it'll be a 1 day week drop, which is Wednesday. If you're not in the suburbs and you're in the city, you can order beer whenever you want. Sometimes it comes the next day if you order afternoon.
Okay.
But like I said, we're trying the suburbs out to sort of see how it goes. Hopefully keep doing it to serve those folks. So right now it's get your order in before Tuesday night, and we'll be out there on Wednesday to get it to you.
That's awesome. Well, hats off to you guys for doing that, and I really hope that goes to plan.
Yeah.
Right on.
absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, before we close up, let me throw out our social media links one more time. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at A Nice Place to Brew and Nice Place to Brew. Our website is www.aniceplacetobrew. And check out our YouTube page at A Nice Place to Brew for all of our past episodes. And we do this webcast every Monday. Why did I say Wednesday? Every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central Time. So check us out here. All right, that's everything. We end every show the same way. We raise a glass and we cheers to. It takes a lot of good beer to make great beer. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.